Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always, told out of voice of radio. So today, it's time to take a look at all of the things we learned from the Pokemon trading card game Players Cup 4, really just the Pokemon Players Cup 4. It's fun, ladies and gentlemen. It was fun. I watched it all weekend. It was brilliant. I was not on the commentary team this time, but if you watched the event closely, you might have noticed there were little 3 to 5 minute videos playing here and there, and I was involved in those. Didn't make them entirely myself. I did the voiceover and the footage and the scripts and all of that, but they were edited by people who are far better at editing than myself. But that's not what was interesting about the Players Cup 4, although hopefully it was kind of interesting. What was really interesting about Players Cup 4 is that Alex Szymanski went and won the whole thing with Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX with Inteleon. Yeah, that is a very good deck. Now, for context here, it should be noted that Chilling Reign was legal just for the global final. So all for the region finals, they were playing up to and including battle styles. But then as soon as the global finals came in, remember that was a new tournament with just the 16 global finalists in, all of a sudden they went and brought in Chilling Reign. And that was a little bit weird because Chilling Reign is one of those sets that really transformed the format. It wasn't just a little bit of a change here and there. It changed basically everything overnight. And it wasn't really because of Rapid Strike Urshifu. It was because of Shadow Rider Calirex. Now, we'll get to this more in a minute, but the theme of the tournament very much was either you played Shadow Rider Calirex or you beat Shadow Rider Calirex. That was it. They were the only two states. Shadow Rider Calirex was the presumed best deck going in. It was the most played and most popular deck at the tournament. It was in every way, shape and form the deck that really did make the tournament. That was a deck that shaped exactly what the tournament was and how the tournament played. But it wasn't a deck that ended up winning. It was Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX with Inteleon. And if we go and take a look at the deck that Alex played, there really wasn't a huge amount from Chilling Reign that went and got chucked in. There were basically two important cards that came around from Chilling Reign. Now, one of them was obviously Inteleon. The other one, which was less important but still pretty relevant in some matchups, was Persimmon. Now, if we go back to Rapid Strike Urshifu itself, single energy, 150 if you became active this turn, can be very useful. Or free energy, discard all your energy, and you do 120 to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon, which is clearly great. And that, incidentally, is where Persimmon comes in. Persimmon says you do an extra 30 damage as long as you're hitting bench GXs and Vs. So it was actually 150 to 2 bench Pokemon. Now, we've talked about this combo before with Telescopic Sight. Telescopic Sight was not played in Alex's deck, but that's not exactly the end of the world, because Alex had Inteleon. And each Inteleon once during your turn lets you drop 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So if 150 isn't enough to get the KO, that is where Inteleon comes in very nicely indeed to go and clean up. Obviously, Mew became a big thing. We will talk about Mew later on down the line in this video. But obviously, Mew coming along and blocking the bench damage would be a big deal. We saw in the first game of the winners finals, Bruno, Alex's opponent, literally just scooped. Just actually scooped straight away as soon as he found out his Mew was prized. Just gave up and went straight to game 2. That's how important Mew can be. Now, do remember that Rapid Strike Energy and Karate Belt as a combo can pay this attack in one go. And over on Twitter, one of the things that Alex said was that playing 2 Karate Belt was, quote, the best idea I've had in years. If you're behind on prizes playing this deck, Karate Belt, Rapid Strike Energy, and you can just pull off that G-Max Rapid Flow straight away. Also, very much worth pointing out that because you're playing the Inteleon line, you will be playing Drizzile. No rare candy here, you want to go through Drizzile, because Drizzile, when you evolve into it, you get to search your deck for any one trainer card and put it in your hand. So things like Karate Belt become so much easier easier to actually search. And while we're talking about bonuses of playing Inteleon, don't forget you've got the one from Sword and Shield that searches out 2 trainers. Yes, you're focused on the one from Chilling Reign, but Alex did play a one-of that Inteleon, and I'm assuming a bunch of other people will as well. And don't forget that the Sobble from the set does let you search for free Rapid Strike Pokemon and bench them, and given that your deck is basically built around Urshifu and Sobble, Keep Calling can be a really, really good attack, especially turn 1 going second. This is a phenomenal deck. And that brings me to my next point. Because like I've said, Shadow Rider Calirex VMAX, presumed best deck going in, most played deck, etc. You hear a lot of very bad, very blunt takes over on Twitter and the like from people talking about the Pokemon trading card game. And one of the most common bad takes you will see is something along the lines of, you can't play Rapid Strike Urshifu because it's weak to Shadow Rider Calirex, and Shadow Rider Calirex is everywhere. Just like people said you can't play Ice Rider Calirex because Zacian is everywhere. For what it's worth, Zacian was not played this weekend at all, not in the global finals, so that kind of defeats that point. There was one Ice Rider Calirex, it did alright, it didn't set the format on fire. It remains to be seen how good that deck's going to end up being. But my point is, no, you can't just say, oh, you're weak to that deck, you'll lose. Now, Alex did only play one of those throughout the weekend, but did go and win 2 games to 1. Only game he dropped, incidentally, the entire tournament, but did still win 2 games to 1. Yes, they hit you for weakness. Yes, that's super awkward, but you're still hitting essentially 150 to 2 bench Pokemon while spreading damage with Inteleon. That's not bad, ladies and gentlemen. That is really not bad at all. The matchup essentially seems to come down to, can you get 2 G-Max Rapid Flow attacks off? If you can, you'll probably win. If you can't, it's because 2 of your Rapid Strike Urshifu have been KO'd, and that at that point is basically the game. You can keep saying X deck is not playable because it's weak to Y, but if Alex had said that, might not have just won the Players' Cup 4. Now, one thing that does need to be mentioned, Mew has basically become an absolutely essential card here. Mew has become a card that if you're not playing, I did a little interstitial video about Mew, and the way that I put it was, let's see how many players are playing Mew, and how many players wish they were. Because as far as I'm concerned, that is essentially your 2 states of being when it comes to Mew. Either you're playing Mew, or you wish you were playing Mew. Now, Rapid Strike Urshifu at the Global Finals was not the most played deck, but going forward, Alex has brought a lot more spotlight to the deck. It is only going to see more play moving forward. And to be extremely blunt here, you need to play Mew. You have got to be playing Mew, unless you are just not worried at all about Rapid Strike Urshifu. But like I've just said, Shadow Rider Calirex, in theory, should have a fantastic Rapid Strike Urshifu matchup, but ended up losing to Alex in Global Finals. And I told you that Alex won that game by using G-Max Rapid Flow. With Mew, that would probably be a win for Shadow Rider Calirex. Mew, because of how ridiculous G-Max Rapid Flow is, may well have just become an absolute must-play in every single deck, unless you are 100% certain that you're either not playing against Rapid Strike Urshifu, or you really do have a borderline auto win. You need to play Mew. Yes, I know post-rotation is going to be awkward. We can talk about that another time. So what does that mean about Shadow Rider Calirex? Very little. Shadow Rider Calirex is still probably the best deck in the format. It's that or Rapid Strike Urshifu. It's at worst the second best deck in the format. It is still a phenomenal deck, and when this card was revealed, I told you it was the best card that had been seen since Zoroark came around in Shining Legends, and it's been a couple of months since I said that, and I still haven't changed my mind. Although, to be fair, that new Genesect does look amazing, but this is not the video for that. And to be fair, although Genesect looks better, and I do think it looks better, it is for fusion decks only, so maybe that means it's not better, I don't know. Again, we can worry about that later. My point is that no, don't panic about Shadow Rider Calirex. Yes, it was the most played deck. Yes, the top finish we saw was 4th place. No, that shouldn't really worry you. You've still got a phenomenal ability that lets you attach energy and draw 2 cards. You've still got Max Geist that builds up very, very quickly and becomes amazing. You've still got the combo with Alchemy V Max, which will allow you to have just one big, giant, smashing attack at some point during the game, maybe even a couple. And you've still got, and I know this is going to be rotating soon, but things like Gengar and Mimikyu as extra little tricks are still amazing. Fog Crystal still makes you a very consistent deck compared to some others around. It is still a phenomenal deck. You are still hitting weakness on stuff like Rapid Strike Urshifu, and like I've said, go and pop Mew in your deck, and until we hit rotation, that may very well end up swinging a matchup back very much towards Shadow Rider Calirex. Having said that, like I've said, Mew rotates in a month, but we're not there yet. The reason this deck probably didn't win is because everyone was gunning for it. Spiritomb was there. Now, Bruno was the only Spiritomb player, but Spiritomb runs through this deck pretty gosh darned easily. We'll talk more about this in a moment, but Galerion Moltres was really one of the stories of the tournament. That was a card that was popping up in deck after deck after deck. We saw a player do extremely well with Malamar V Max, which is not a deck that a lot of people were expecting to see, although I, for one, was absolutely delighted. The fact of the matter is, Darkness decks were absolutely everywhere. It was a very bad time to be playing Shadow Rider Calirex because everyone was gunning for it. It's very much like Garbodor that came around in Guardians Rising. Garbodor for a single energy does 20 damage for each item card in your opponent's discard pile. And at Seattle Regionals, when this became legal, it was 24 of the top 32 and 6 of the top 8. It was absolutely about as dominant as we have ever seen any deck be. And then people adjusted. And people started playing fewer trainers. And it wasn't that Garbodor got bad, it's that Garbodor became a bad call for a bunch of tournaments. That is the only bad thing we can say about Shadow Rider Calirex. Not that it's bad, it ain't bad. But there may be some tournaments like the Players' Cup 4 Global Finals where it's got such a target on its back that it really is going to struggle. And while we're here, let's pivot into talking about Galerion Moltres. Galerion Moltres is absolutely busted. It is one of the most ridiculous cards we've seen in a while. It is absolutely stunning. And I don't think, I've always said it's a good card, because it's clearly a good card. But until this weekend, I don't think I was giving it enough credit for how absolutely flat out ridiculously brilliantly amazing it actually is. The ability Dire Flame Wings lets you attach a darkness energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon once during your turn, and it doesn't stack, so even if you've got multiple Galerion Moltres, you can still only use this once. But it means that Aura Burn for 190 is essentially a 2-turn attack, because one of those turns you're going to use Dire Flame. Incidentally, it can be a 2-turn attack while only attaching 1 energy from your hand, which is nuts. And it gets a 1-hit KO on Shadow Rider Calirex V Max, as well as stuff like Gengar and Mimikyu. But even stuff that isn't weak but just has low HP, things like Crobat, it's an extremely good attacker that basically builds itself up. We saw that Arceus and Dialga and Palkia decks over the weekend, they weren't playing Zacian anymore. They were playing Galerion Moltres because it is such a consistent attacker. Okay, it's not quite as good an attacker as Zacian, and I'm sorry it's not. And you do lose Intrepid Sword, which is clearly a great ability. But the fact of the matter is, you're hitting such a good weakness that it becomes a better attacker, and your ability just lets you get energy rather than having to rely on drawing into things like Metal Saucer. So you know what? Even though on paper it doesn't have as good an attack as Zacian, because of the weakness and the fact that it's easier to get rolling, it becomes a better attacker. At least in this metagame. And of course, in a world where everyone's playing Galerion Moltres, that makes Shadow Rider Calirex a much worse proposition in terms of which deck you should actually be playing. Make no mistake about it, Galerion Moltres is here to stay. In any deck that is or can be playing Darkness Energy, it's just a great attacker to build up for free without using your energy attachments. But while you're hitting such a phenomenal weakness, it becomes just a ridiculous ridiculous tech. Now, speaking of ridiculous techs, we saw over the weekend that Marshadow is still absolutely a phenomenal card. There were so many games that were won because Malamar was sitting on the bench, where we saw a play along the lines of playing Path to the Peak to turn off abilities of Rulebox Pokemon, and then a reset stamp to put them down to a low hand, and then a big KO. But because Marshadow is sitting on the bench, it can just use Resetting Hold to get rid of Path to the Peak. And then Galerion Moltres can keep accelerating energy. And Shadow Rider Calirex can keep drawing cards and attaching energy. We saw this play a bunch. A player searching out Marshadow and dropping it down on the bench. It was largely for Path to the Peak. There are other uses for it, but I think the big use for Marshadow at the moment really is Path to the Peak. And the deal is extremely simple. In any deck that relies on abilities on Rulebox Pokemon, you play your Marshadow, and then inevitably there is going to be that turn where your opponent tries to slow you down while playing Path to the Peak, at which point you just use Marshadow and move on. Again, it's a card which is going to be lost to rotation, and it is a big card that's going to be lost to rotation. But right now, Marshadow is another card that you really should be considering in a huge amount of decks. And obviously there is that knock-on effect here that post-rotation, when we don't have Marshadow anymore, what is that going to mean in terms of how good Path to the Peak is? And the short answer is, in the short term, Path to the Peak is going to become a very good card, and we are not going to have as good a counter to it as we might like. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's the way it is. The last point I want to bring up about the Players' Cup 4 isn't really a point at all, but I just wanted to mention that there was no Malamar played. But I don't think we should read too much into this. It was 16 players, and it was very much a metagame kind of thing. I still believe, Frank Turner nod, that it's one of the best decks in the format, and yes, I know that Antoine's brilliant finish at Japan Nationals was in a format with Evolving Skies legal. I'm completely aware of that, but I still think, and incidentally, there are no really cards from Evolving Skies you're relying on there, I still think Malamar's one of the best decks in the format, and now it turns out we are actually hitting weakness on Rapid Strike Urshifu, which, as we've seen, is kind of a big deal. I think moving forward in this format, we are going to see that Malamar is going to be a much bigger player. So no, Malamar didn't represent this weekend, but it essentially means that there were 16 players and none of them chose to play Malamar. I would not read much into that at all. I think Malamar is absolutely still one of the very best decks around. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That was the Pokemon Players Cup 4, the TCG version of it, and frankly, it was fun. If you haven't watched it, I would highly recommend that you go and check out twitch.tv/Pokemon TCG. Just go and check it out. This is not like an advert. I'm not being paid by Pokemon. I just think it was a really good watch, and you should go and check it out. But it's something that I enjoyed greatly over the course of the weekend, and I think if you watch it back, you will probably too. That's what you need to know. That's the takeaway, and frankly, yeah, things are changing, ladies and gentlemen. Chilling Reign has made a huge impact on the format, but there is a very strong argument that Rapid Strike Urshifu is still king. Incidentally, that does mean that Rapid Strike Urshifu has now won 2 Players' Cups in a row, so clearly the deck to beat moving forward. So that's what I think about all of this, ladies and gentlemen, but now I would like to know what you think about all of this, so let me know in the comment section, would you? Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.